All right, everybody, welcome back to drawing. So for this demonstration, I'm going to be showing you basic charcoal drawing on a toned sheet of paper. So this is a sheet of paper that is already toned a certain color versus, say, a white piece of paper that I've toned with charcoal or something like that. Now, you can see that I'm using just a small piece of paper, and for this, I'm only going to be drawing 3 objects. This is for the sake of time, because I don't want this video to be, longer than it needs to demonstrate the point. But, make sure that you're adhering to the project sheets and everything like that. Now, the other thing that you can see is that because this is a loose sheet of paper, it's not attached to like my drawing pad. So what I've actually done is I've taken my blue painter's tape and I've taped a border around it. And what I really want to do is I want a piece that's just long enough so you can see I still have the bottom here. And I want to place it about half on and half off of the paper. So it is to create a kind of, about half-inch border all the way around. Now, you can use or you can do this without blue painter's tape if you've got like regular masking tape. The only thing about regular masking tape is that the glue on the back tends to be much more sticky, and when you try to peel it off, it tends to rip your paper. So if you are using masking tape, what I would suggest is when you take the piece off, before you stick it down to your paper, press it against your clothing or like your bed sheet or something, just to get a little lint on the back side of the sticky part, which makes it a little bit less sticky. So that way, when you peel it off later, when you're finished with your drawing, it's not going to take as much, or it's not going to rip your paper or anything, or at least hopefully it won't. You should still be fairly careful when you peel the tape off, regardless. But the point is, I like this blue painter's tape because it's not as sticky as regular masking tape. Now, for this drawing, I'm going to be using charcoal. So, and something about this toned paper, because it's kind of a bluish gray, I'm going to allow the color of the paper to act as my kind of mid to light gray, if you will. So you'll see that not only am I going to use vine charcoal a little bit here and there, but I'm also going to be using compressed charcoal in 2 different forms. So, I can use the vine charcoal in place of the compressed stuff for sketching and whatnot. I usually like that more for like doing my outline because it erases easier than the compressed, which you see here and here, which tend to be, they stick to the paper a little bit more because they have a binder in them, whereas the vine doesn't. Now, aside from that, you'll also see I've got my white charcoal pencil here, and I'm going to be using this for like highlights here and there. So you'll also get to see what that looks like on a toned piece of paper. So in case you're interested or you're wondering what that was. Now, the other things I'm going to use in this, so, my pencil is going to be probably more for little details at the end, things like that, whereas I'm going to use Vine more for sketching, the white for highlights, things like that. And then I'll probably use my stick of compressed for darker passages and what have you. Now, aside from that, I am going to start off by toning this paper a little bit more to compensate for all of the black that I have. And so what I'm going to do there is I'm actually going to take a piece of my vine charcoal, my thick vine. You could also use your, compressed stick for this as well. However, we want to do this very, very lightly, okay? But what I'm going to do, I'm, going to rub this on the paper very lightly, and then I'm going to take a makeup sponge and kind of smooth it out. Now, I could also use a paper towel to do this, so I'll kind of show you half and half. A lot of it depends on personal preference. But the other thing that you'll notice is that like this colored paper, this colored tinted paper, this is Canson Metientis. It has a pretty pronounced texture on it, which I'm sure you can start to see as I am laying this charcoal down. So that's something to be aware of. You can also see down at the bottom here maybe that there's a little bit of an embossment with the logo and whatnot. So that's something else to keep in mind too. It's just part of it. So let's see what the makeup sponge is going to do versus the paper towel. Now I'm going to tear my paper towel down. So I'm going to have one, half of it that I kind of fold up for more general things. And then later on, I might use little bits of my other piece to do, little, kind of finagly things here and there. So you can see here, like, the makeup sponge kind of smudges it, but it also takes a lot of it away too. So I've usually been more a fan of the paper towel for this, because it does a little bit better job, generally speaking. Now you can also see that part of this too is the marks left by the piece of vine are kind of showing up a little. So I'm trying to push down a little hard to kind of make this as even as possible. And the point of this, the point of why I'm doing this is that I'm going to, after I make my sketch in Vine, I'm going to, erase back out of this to reveal the color of the paper as kind of my lighter passages. So you can see how much charcoal just came off on that. So that being said, I want to start to sketch my actual image. So for this, I've chosen 3 objects, more for the sake of time than anything else. But I have a jar, a teacup, and a lemon squeezer. So what I want to do is I want to make a couple establishing marks. Once again, very much like our sighting video with sighting and angle sighting. I want to do basically these same kind of things. So let's start by making our top measurement. So it needs to be roughly that tall. And the height is basically, or the width is basically 3/4. So let's say my highest object is there and my lowest point is there. Well, so then I know that, and I'm measuring from the top of the handle on the lemon squeezer to the bottom edge of it, because that's my highest and lowest points. Now, comparatively speaking, it needs to be just a little bit longer than this is wide. So I'm going to use my maul stick here. And I also want it to come off of that just a little bit further out than the top 2 marks I made. And I need it to come over a little bit more. So then I can also say, I'm going to make a mark right there as well, because in my perception, the length here is the same as from the edge of the jar to the first part of, or the split, I should say, in the juicer thing. So then, now I know that I have, my objects need to fall within these marks, all right? So from there, let's also make a mark or a measurement for our vase here, or I'm sorry, the jar. So I'm going to measure that against the entirety of the composition. And so the jar needs to be about halfway between this mark and that mark. So we're going to say, if that's about halfway. So I know that my jar needs to fit between these 2 marks. Now let's also make a measurement for how tall the jar is. So the jar is just barely taller than it is wide. So I want to go somewhere about right there, because it's not quite to the same level as this up here, so we're gonna go just a little higher with it. But it's not quite as tall, but it's not overtly shorter than it either. So then I know that once again, based on that the jar needs to fit between those areas. So likewise, what I can do, let's just go ahead and make a general rectangle shape so we know where that needs to be. And so you can see I'm being very light. This thin, kind of vine charcoal is a little bit on the hard side and everything like that. But let's also make a measurement for the width of the lid there. Let's compare that. It's about 1/4. So we want something kind of like that. All right. Now from there, let's make the teacup, because that's another easy shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a mark at the edge of the teacup, and I'm going to put my thumb on the edge of my jar there. And let's measure that against okay, it's about as wide as the jar lid. Okay, so we can take that, come over from the edge. Now I can say, well, the teacup needs to come to that mark. Now let's measure the teacup lengthwise. All right, now I'm going to measure against. Okay, so it's going to be about this wide. So from the bottom edge of this to about the middle edge of the jar lid. So I'm going to put the top of my vine at that edge, and then I'm going to put my thumb there. So I know that the teacup needs to fall within these two marks, or between these two marks. Now let's also make a measurement of its height. So I'm going to go from the bottom edge of the handle to the top edge of the rim. And now we're going to compare that. So it's about the same distance wide or tall as it is wide. So let's see that. So we know that it needs to be about that wide. Now what I want to do is find out where it starts. So I'm going to measure from the dividing line between the jar lid and the jar itself to where the top of that is, where the top of the teacup starts. We got that, and I'm going to measure it against the lid there. So it's about the same distance. So I know that the teacup needs to come up to about there, and it needs to be roughly within that kind of square that I just made there. Okay, so from there, let's start making some general kind of angles to follow for the juicer thing. Once again, I'm making just basic lines so that I know kind of where things need to fall. All right, so I have two basic angles and two basic shapes. Now from there, what I want to do is start to kind of refine these shapes. So I know that generally speaking, that needs to fall in there. That needs to go there. of these lines are either going to get erased or obscured, so it doesn't really matter quite, you know, how accurate they are. And let's also make so the main juicer part needs to fall within this boundary, within this shape, and then we know that the arms need to be in that kind of space. Okay, so we've got basic shapes and things like that. Now let's also make a few indications of some of our background elements. So we got a fold there, a fold there, something roughly right there. And I'm making a few more measurements, so got a fold in the book that cuts through there. And let's see. Our book kind of cuts in somewhere like that, and a little bit of it that comes down, and likewise. All right, so we've got a pretty good framework going. Now what I want to do is start to refine some of my shapes. So we're going to start by making a couple other quick measurements. But first I'm going to make a couple general angles too. So right now I'm holding my tool, my mark making tool, up to the general angle that I see cutting through the center of the teacup. Now, so from there, you also see that I'm going to use a couple different erasers, chiefly my rubber eraser and then my kneaded eraser in this video. You'll also see me use the detail eraser somewhat too. But so we've got that. Now let's say the distance between the two rims of the cup. We're going to compare that. So it's also roughly the same height. Okay. So we know that that needs to fall within that. And how tall is the base there? So the base is something about like that. Okay, but we also know that it's going to need to curve outwards some. So from there, let's start making some more general angle kind of shapes. Now, for this, I'm following my angles as I see them. So I'm holding my edge up to the angles that I see. Now, let's also make a measurement from the rim to the base. it's also going to fall within that realm. So then I can also start to make some of those kinds of guys, some of those angles. All right, so from there, I also know that my handle is going to come up from there. Now, before I get going on that, I also want to come over and do the lip of the actual cup itself. Or the rim of the teacup, if you will. And once again, I'm just kind of simplifying the curve down into basic angles that I kind of see. And just kind of following them around. And this will help me to finesse the curve here in a little bit. All right. So I think I've got, now I need to come down just a little. There's a little bit of a lip that kind of curves out. All right, so coming along. Now from there, so just doing that, I notice now that my, my jar is a little small. So, or that my teacup has gotten a little too big, I should say. So we're gonna kind of, once again, there's a lot of back and forth that happens in this. So let's do another. So once again, don't be afraid to, finagle your drawing some, because, I've been doing this for a long time and even I make mistakes. All right. And that's kind of one of the challenges of drawing from life versus from drawing from a picture, or, tracing or something like that, is that, I'm not a mechanical entity. I cannot make things quite as perfect as a machine can, but that's part of the fun, and part of why we do this. So the other thing I can do, make an indication of where that needs to be. So from there, let's say, well, needs to cut in just a little. And most of the jar's proportions are pretty accurate still. We're gonna extend him over just a little bit. Okay, now the other thing I want to do is compensate for the lid here. All right. Now I can also come in and cut the jar edge in just a little bit. And once again, we're going to refine this some more as we go here, so just bear with me for a while. And some of this is going to, you know, it's not just going to be line work that we do, it's going to be in the shading that we do as well. Alrighty, now, once again, another part of this drawing from life, we want to try to stay in the same vantage point, because if we shift, then, you know, it's going to start shifting on us and everything like that as well. So let's come over here and start making some marks. Once again, I'm just trying to follow the basic kind of angles that I see. And then we'll finesse here in a little bit. So from there, we want something like that. I apologize for the silence every now and then. I'm just trying to concentrate. So let's make a measurement of that hinge there. And I think the hinge is gonna go a little off the page. That's all right. So the other part, once again, we're just following basic angles and things that I see. And then we're going to refine here in just a little bit. Okay. You can also see that I chose this object for a kind of deliberate reason, and that is because it's somewhat challenging. Alright. So that comes to there. eyes here. Once again, that's part of the fun of drawing from life as opposed to drawing from a photograph. All right, so approximate a few things. And okay, so got a few little things here and there that are a little off. Namely, the teacup. So we're gonna try to finagle him a little better. And once again, as I begin to refine this, we're also going to alter it somewhat as well. Okay. The handle's gonna go a little off too. So once again, this is, you know, as you go, it's totally fine to make changes as you go. This is where, you know, looking is and seeing is very important, because it's going to dramatically alter, you know, how we perceive something, but also we need to look at, you know, those little minute detail-y things here and there. So from there, I'm going to switch over to my my compressed, and I'm going to start to kind of fill some things in generally, just so I have a better idea of where my actual objects are and everything like that. As you can see, I'm not trying to push down really hard right now. I'm just kind of trying to, you know, fill in blank space, if you will, where it's kind of darker in the background. And we're also going to go through and, you know, do a variety of different things where we're going to add, you know, little bits here and there and what have you as we refine it. And that way we can darken things and add more specific details and all kinds of different stuff like that. So let's say so hopefully we can see everything a little bit better now. Now I am going to switch over to my makeup sponge for this to smudge some of this out and darken it, because it's going to be a little bit more gentle than the paper towel. I don't want to take everything off. I just want to even it out just a little bit. All right. Okay. The other thing too, I haven't done everything in the background because parts of this are going to be a little lighter here and there, and I want that to kind of come through. All right. Now, let's switch over and erase back out some of our highlights from the tone. So I'm going to be using my, rubber eraser. I've also got my handy dandy, sandpaper to clean it off with. So I'm going to go ahead and clean it a little bit just so I'm not starting out with a dirty eraser. But I'm also going to probably make use of, my little guys here as well. So, you're gonna see me switch kind of back and forth between these things. This is the other reason why I like my easel, because it's got a little tray that I can hold things with, all kinds of stuff like that. So let's start doing a little erasing just to indicate where these highlights are going to be, and we're going to add more of them back in with the white charcoal and whatnot as well. So bear with me for a minute. I'm going to switch over to my little guy for a minute. Once again, it's probably a little hard to see at the moment, but we are going to begin refining things as well here in a minute. So it'll all start to kind of come together here in just a second. So the other thing is that on this paper, with these erasers, I'm going to get all this eraser dust, and so that's where my brush comes in handy too. Now I want to be careful with that because the brush will smudge a lot of it as well, and what have you, so just something to keep in mind, and everything like that. Now I'm going to switch back over to this little guy. Kind of gonna use him to redraw my handle back out here. And once again, we're gonna redefine this all here in a minute anyway, so it's really rough in the beginning, but then we gradually refine it. Once again, remember, simple to complex, light to dark, etc., etc. So we've got a nice kind of reflection there and there. All right. So I'm going to switch back over to my vine here. Actually, I'm going to switch over to my charcoal pencil in this case, and I'm going to go really lightly, but I want to start to refine some of my line work. And once again, I'm barely touching this pencil to the paper because this is compressed just like the stick, and it comes off really dark if I push down hard. And the darker it is, the harder it is to erase. So I want to go light and I want to go sketchy in my line quality so that I'm not making too much of a hard edge line right off the bat. Now, Now, the nice thing about charcoal too is I've always found it to be a little bit more forgiving than graphite, in that if you mess up, you can kind of smudge it off pretty easily. Not really that big of a deal. And just restart again. Now, part of that is, once again, you know, you got to work from light to dark, because if I'm sitting here with compressed and just making it solid black, you know, it's not going to be as forgiving as if I'm starting lightly like I am. So once again, I'm looking back and forth between my objects and my drawing. I'm trying to pay attention to little subtle kind of things I see, like there's a part where the drape kind of comes over, you know, the teacup handle there for a bit. And likewise, got something there. Okay. All right. Okay. Also going to make a few indications here and there where my shadows and things like that are. Okay. Let's go over here. Once again, you can see me using the maul stick as I begin to refine my line work and whatnot. And this is because, you know, even though if I was doing this in graphite, I could rest my hand on it and it would smudge onto my hand, but it wouldn't really detract from the drawing so much until I started getting, you know, really in depth with like the shadows and whatnot, and then I might smudge into the highlight and everything like that. And, you know, I want to avoid that, but in charcoal, it doesn't have the same kind of binder or amount of binder in the charcoal as the graphite pencil does, so it's very, very easy to smudge this, and when you smudge it, you gotta start all over again. So, you know, having the maul stick or using a yardstick in its place, you know, is going to be advantageous for you, probably, unless you just got the steadiest hands in the world. Then, you know, more, well, kudos to you, but you know, I've especially found that, you know, sometimes you have to make a work of art for, you know, school or for commission or something, and you're not really feeling it in the moment maybe, and, you know, your hands, you're tired or whatever, and your hand gets shaky, and the next thing you know, you're making mistakes left and right. And so it's easy to just kind of eliminate all of those problems right off the bat. Okay. Now, also some things kind of coming off, going off the edge, and what have you. All right. Okay, so there. Now, once again, I'm using the basic angles that I made initially to help me finesse those subtle curves and things. Okay, now let's say I'm also going to start filling in some areas that I see that are shadows, which will help to kind of make the distinction between these various elements as well. Okay. All right. I'm also going to make a few more indications of where my drapery and things are going to be here and there as well. Okay. Now, problem with circles at an angle, it can be a little tricky and to make it look right. So this is another one of those areas where, you know, don't be afraid if you're drawing something like this, you know, you might have to do it a time or two. That's all right. Come over there a little bit. Now my, where'd my sharpener go? The pencil's getting a little dull, so I'm going to sharpen it here real quick. I could also sharpen my vine charcoal if I wanted, but I want something a little darker for what I'm doing at the moment, so that's why I'm using the pencil. And I'm using a 6B charcoal pencil, which is extra soft, so it has less binder in it, and everything like that. But the point being to still, once again, lightly kind of finesse everything down. we're getting pretty close here to being able to move on to the actual shading and whatnot. Okay, so now that I've got my objects pretty well laid in, let's make a few more indications here and there for my drapery and things. Just so when I start laying in the deep shadows, I know where everything needs to go and everything like that. Now, I'm not going to touch the jar so much like this because we can kind of see through it, but a lot of the things are a little bit more ambiguous. So I'm going to do most of the jar just through shading and blending versus trying to sketch out, you know, like lines where things need to go and what have you. I'm going to let it be a little bit more ethereal versus, you know, more hard or hard edged or what have you. And the drapery I'm going to be a little bit more loose with as well, because once again it's going to be a little bit more subtle in the background versus our main objects and you know what have you. So I don't necessarily need it to be quite as you know well defined or anything like that. Okay, now also got a few things coming off of there, and I've also got a shadow coming off of that guy. Likewise, just a little one off of there. Now, okay, so I've also got a few little guys coming out of there. And some background. Kind of guys there as well. Now, the next thing I want to do is go in and, like you saw, you know, right here, I'm going to use the soft, you know, charcoal stick here, or pencil, I'm sorry, to go in and just lay in a few areas of the deep shadows, just so I know where they're at, and then I won't have to darken those areas quite as much here in a few minutes. Okay, so the other thing I can see. Okay. Now, and something else to remember on this, all drawing, no matter what drawing you're doing, charcoal, graphite, you know, pastels, what have you, everything's going to be kind of a little bit of back and forth, push and pull. You know, you push something a little too far one way, you pull it back the other way, etc., etc. You know. So once again, right now I'm really just looking for those kind of cast shadow like areas, those kind of deep dark areas, if you will. So I've also got a pretty major one back here. All right, so let's add just a few here and there, just to help us pick out the background some more. Now, you know, right now it's very loose, and here in a second I'm going to go through and kind of smudge a lot of this stuff out, and then we're going to come back in and redefine everything and you know, go from there. So I'm going to start by, you know, kind of smudging out the background and whatnot first. So we don't lose sight of our objects. But then we're gonna go into the objects as well here in a second. Okay, so what I want to do now is I could use, you know, my eraser or my makeup sponge here, but that's going to be a little too much. And it's not going to get down in some of the areas that I want. So I'm actually going to use a little bit of paper towel. So I'm going to tear a little piece off of my, you know, smudging towel that I was using. And I'm also going to use a blending stump to get into some of those corners. But first, before I go to this, I'm going to do a few kind of bigger general things here and there in the background. So now, you know, part of drawing on this tone paper is that it's never going to be completely smooth because of the texture that the paper has. But that's all right. You know, it just adds a little something to the drawing, in my opinion. You know, I really like the way charcoal looks on top of paper called laid paper. It was very common in the 18th century, but it's a little hard to find nowadays, and when you do find it, it's usually expensive. But it has this kind of striation on it, and the striations pick up the charcoal in an interesting way. Well, anything that you put on it, really, it picks up in an interesting way. Just kind of fun. You know, I told you guys to get, you know, Reeves BFK or Canson Drawing or this, you know, Canson Me Tientis if you can. But if you see anything else out there that you want to try, you know, by all means, try it, you know. A big part of making artwork in general is finding what works best for you and what works best for what you're trying to achieve in your artwork as well. Okay. See, I'm being a little brash. I'm I'm going over some of my objects somewhat with the towel just to take some of those lines down and add some shadowing, like especially on the inside here, because that will be about as dark as that goes. I mean, I'll add a little bit to it here and there, but generally speaking, I'm going to try to do as little work as I have to. I'm going to try to do a lot of it by just, you know, erasing back out where, you know, highlights and things should be, but then also going back in with the dark marks here and there and just making a few extra marks on top that then is like, okay, bam, then it's done. So hopefully that will come across here in a few minutes. So you can also see that no matter, you know, a lot of these dark lines I've made, I've also started to kind of push them back down somewhat. All right, so from there, what I want to do, I'm gonna kind of hit it with my brush just to even it a little bit. Now, I'm gonna hit it with my blending stump just here and there, not a lot, just here and there. In fact, I'm probably going to use a few things here back and forth for a minute. All right, so I'm going to come back to the blending stump here in just a second. But first, let's go back to our eraser for a second. Now, in this case, I'm also going to use my kneaded eraser so we can see how that works as well. So in the case of the teacup here, my hard edge line is created by the shadow coming off of this background element into the jar there. So I don't want to have a hard edge line on the teacup itself. I want it to form the actual hard line. So in that case, I'm going to use the eraser to take that excess that I rubbed over and erase up to that line. You can see too that the kneaded eraser is much more subtle. I really like it kind of almost as a blending tool, to be honest. You know, I'm using it to erase right now. I'm trying to be very soft in how much pressure I'm putting on it. That way I can erase it, you know, just little bits here and there. Now that brings us down to the bottom here where I need a little bit of shadow coming up kind of right in here, and we're going to give them just a little bit more on the inside there as well as there. Now I'm going to go to my blending stump because I want more control in this case. And so you can see that the blending stump kind of eliminates some of that out, but we're going to add more to it here in a few minutes as well. Now the other thing I can do is use my finger. So I'm going to use my finger there a little bit to just soften some of that stuff up. Now I'm going to go back to my kneaded eraser. So looking at it, needs to come there. And once again, I'm going to add white charcoal to this at the end as well to really bring a few of those highlight areas out in the extreme. So in this case, I'm letting that, you know, kind of light blue toned paper act as my light tone in this case. So you can see here too, I'm using the kneaded eraser to just kind of pat rather than erase out. And then I'm going to settle it down with my finger there. And we're going to make this even more striking when we come back in a minute and add deeper shadows and details by adding the kind of silver lip around the ring there as well. Need a little bit off of that. Now let's do the handle again. And once again, we're going to pick out major highlights with the white charcoal here in a few minutes too. So it doesn't look quite right just yet, but that's okay because once again, we're going to work our way up to it. Now, the other thing I can see here, I need to fix my edge. Just gonna try to settle it down some. All right, so from there, let's try to redefine a few things. So you're going to see me switch back and forth between quite a few tools here. And a few of these things, like right now, I'm using the eraser to cut back into the shadow area to create the idea of a halftone reflection around the base of the teacup before it crests up into the actual cup itself. And once again, we're going to pull that back out when I add some darker marks here in a few minutes. Okay, so from there, so we've got our cup pretty well defined. Let's switch over to our jar here. So I want to make a few defining marks here and there. once again, want to be careful and just how dark some of those marks are going to be. Now, what I'm going to do is kind of generally, well, first off, let me redefine the edge of the bottom of the lid here real quick. And I'm going to flip this over for just a second, so bear with me. So once again, you know, I recommend that you guys actually draw in the orientation of the objects that you're looking at. But if you find it easier to get to something by flipping it, you know, go, by all means do it. You know, don't make it needlessly hard on yourself. Okay, so from there, I'm going to take my vine and I'm going to kind of roughly fill in this area. But first, I kind of got rid of my mark for where the liquid in the jar is supposed to go. So, get something like that. Got a little bit of shade there and there. Now I'm going to kind of fill the rest of this in, smudge it, erase back out where the kind of highlight reflections in the jar are, and then I'll go in and deepen a few areas here and there with the compressed. Now, it's also important to note that, you know, on your supply video, I asked you guys to get stick compressed like this versus the pencil. These are the exact same thing. I told you to get this because, you know, you get more for your money in terms of you don't have to sharpen a bunch of wood down. These tend to break easy. But you can also sharpen this down into a point like the pencil and what have you. It just depends. All right, so in this case, I'm going to use my paper towel to smudge, and I'm going to try to be really careful to stay within the boundaries as much as possible, and then I'll probably take my blending stump here in a minute and you know, get into like the little corners and things that are a little more difficult to do with the paper towel. Okay, so all right. Now let's take the kneaded eraser. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, because I was using it quite a bit here, I'm going to knead it up and, you know, kind of repress it and mix some of that charcoal back into this, so I've got a fairly clean kind of surface going. Now what I want to do, I want to look at my objects here and look at where I can see like highlights and reflections on the jar. So I've got a pretty major one that comes in from the the juicer thing here, reflecting on it. And then another one from the light. Once again, we're going to pick a few things out with the white charcoal on this as well. And we've got a little bit of reflection coming off of the cup. Now you can see there I've gotten, you know, kind of dirty, so I'm going to press and knead it so I get a little bit more of a clean surface. A lot of this I want to be very subtle too. Really not pressing down with it all that much. Everything like that. Now the other thing is that I want that area to stay kind of dark or more dark. I do want a little bit more of a highlight there. there. And a little bit here and there. But I also want the liquid in my jar, this my painting medium, is going to be a little lighter too. I don't want it to go full blown as light as the teacup because it is kind of more in the gray range. But I'm going to do something kind of like that. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And when I add the white, it'll look more appropriate, or more accurate, I should say. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch back over to my compressed, and I'm going to start adding a few little areas where we have darker passages in this, where things are reflecting through it and what have you. Likewise. And so the nice part about this is, you know, I don't have to be completely accurate, because when I add a few little detail-y things to the top with the white charcoal, it's just gonna pop and it's gonna look great, you know. So some of this is, you know, knowing when to say enough and when you need more. So that's something else that, like, you'll get more, the more you do this, you know, the more you'll kind of see where those things need to be. So in this case, because I want this darker area to stay more localized, I don't want it to spread out as much as the other stuff, I'm going to use the blending stump to blend it, because I can control it a little more. Here and there. And I'm going to erase back out of this here in a second as well, just to reestablish a few of those things that, you know, get obscured in the blending and what have you. And so once again, you know, this whole endeavor, no matter what you're drawing, there's going to be a lot of back and forth in it, you know, where you kind of overblend here and you got to erase back out a little bit, and kind of go back and forth a little. You know, it's just something that it's just inevitable. So don't be dismayed by that either. It's just something that happens. All right. So once again, I'm going to highlight back out of the, or erase back out of this. Just here and there this time. I'm going to be a little bit more subtle this time. And once again, back and forth, back and forth. And we're going to darken these deep areas in the background up too, so, you know, there's still some things to be done. Okay. that. All right. Now, here's a really nice trick that I love the kneaded eraser for. I can see that there's a slight highlight in the jar right under the rim of the lid where, the screw part of the jar is. So I'm going to make a really fine point with my kneaded eraser, and I'm going to come along and just gently kind of pick that out. And once again, we're going to add more here in a minute with the white charcoal to pick that out some more too. But this time I'm, kind of made more of an edge versus a point. The edge tends to work a little better than a tiny point, which just gets pushed around. All right. And so, this is something too, like if we're doing a portrait or something, we can, make this like little edge in the, paper or in the kneaded eraser, and we can make individual hairs through the charcoal and, all kinds of different things like that. And once again, we're going to add some more little darker details here and there, like to make those screws in the jar and all of that kind of stuff here in a minute. Now, let's go to the top of the jar lid here, which is all fairly dark. So we're going to just kind of color him in general again. And we're going to add a little bit of shadow here and there on other parts of the lid that we can see. And once again, we're going to add some more detail-y kinds of things to that here in a few minutes as well, with the compressed pencil and what have you. So I'm going to go back to my little piece of paper towel, and I'm going to try to be, once again, really careful to smudge all this in just such a way. Now, sharpen my pencil again, and let's pick out a few other things here. So okay. So bam. We're also gonna define back edge there. Now, I can be a little selective in how I come in and do some of this shadowing too. Jars and, you know, round things like this, especially at an angle, can be a little weird, a little challenging. So, you know, don't be dismayed either. You know, it takes a little practice. All right, so now I'm going to go back to my blending stump. And work that in. Now I'm going to flip over again on you, so apologize. Hopefully you can kind of see what I'm doing with this. Once again, we're going to add a few of those white highlights here and there in a few minutes. And really pick some things out. Now, I'm going to re-pick out some of my top highlights here. Flip back over so I can really see everything. The other thing I want to do is make a few little subtle kind of things where these highlights start to fade away as they curve back into space. So for instance, and it's these little subtle kinds of things that really add, you know, realism to your drawing. So these are things to keep in mind, because it's really the little details that add realism to anything. You know, I can make something that looks fairly realistic, but it's just general enough to be not specific, if you will. You know, so like right now it's fairly general, and it looks fairly decent, but once again, here in a few minutes, we're going to pop a few extra things in on top of there, and then it's going to be just, wow, you know, it's going to really stand out at us. I'm going to put a little extra shadow here and there. Very, very little. Just in a couple places. Okay, so I'm going to take my blending stump again, and this time I'm going to be very gentle. You know, on this paper, you know, once again, I can really see the texture of the paper coming through it, but that's okay. It kind of adds to it. The texture also, in this case, helps to hold the charcoal in place. So, you know, it can kind of be your friend and what have you. All right, now went over my line there just a bit. And while I got this point on and we're kind of working on this area, I'm going to go in and add a few things here and there. I'm going to flip over again on you real fast. Sorry about that. Okay. So flip it the other way for just a second. Now I'm going to use a different blending stub than the one I've been using for black to just kind of settle that line down just a little bit. Okay. Now we're going to add these darker marks here and there. Okay. Now, something else I would encourage you to do is going to sound a little hypocritical of me, considering what it is I'm doing at the moment. The other part about this is, you know, I'm good enough that I can kind of see where my issues lie, but you guys, you know, you might see me, I'm getting really up close like this. Well, when you get really close to a drawing like this, you can also begin to lose sight of certain things. So it's good to step back from it and look at it from a distance. Usually I like to look at it from about 4 or 5 feet away and especially look at it compared to your reference, and then you can sometimes see certain things that you might overlook otherwise. So it's just something to keep in mind. It will help you out in the long run. It helps you to see certain things, and what have you. All right. I'm also going to flip this over once again. I'm sorry to keep doing this to you, but it's just easier for me to get to certain things in a fluid kind of manner by doing this. Okay. Now, okay. Now, apologize once again. I'll flip it back over in just a second. So I just added, some kind of darker areas to the shadow portions of the teacup. Now I'm using my blending stump to kind of finesse them back down and smooth them out a little bit. Especially in these tiny areas, it's the tiny little point there is advantageous. Now the other thing I noticed that my tip is covered in quite a bit of charcoal, so you can see I can wipe it off, and now it's gonna still look black, and there's definitely still charcoal on there, but it's not as much, and so it's going to blend a little easier, better now, because I'm not just pushing charcoal around now. It's, I can kind of control it. So that's something else is, these blending stumps you need to kind of clean off from time to time. And the easiest way is just to wipe them on a piece of paper towel. You can also rub it against sandpaper, but it starts to chew them up. And, I've seen people do that. For a variety of reasons. You might want something that's a little bit more ragged to create a certain effect, so that could be a reason. I would also encourage you guys to save your tools, even if they seem worn out, because you never know when it might be just the right thing to do something with. Like when I paint, I've got a lot of old worn out brushes that I don't really use on a regular basis anymore, but I have them because sometimes I need something like really hard and stumpy, so I take like a really old worn out brush that barely has any bristles anymore, and it just does the right thing for what I need in that moment. And so likewise, with this kind of stuff, like I said, sometimes I cut up the erasers and, tear up the little pieces of paper towel, what have you. You can make your own blending stumps out of paper and whatnot. It just all depends on what you want to do. All right. So that being done, something like that. Now, gonna kind of color in this background area because it's probably the deepest or one of the deepest blacks that I've got. And it's pretty hard edged too. Now I'm also going to take my blending stump to that and just kind of smooth it out a little. You also see I just blew on it. That's because as I'm blending this, a little bit of the charcoal dust is coming off onto the white, or the part of my teacup that needs to be white, and I don't want it there. But if I smudge or wipe my hand across it, it's going to be it's going to mess up a lot of what I've done already, so I don't want to do that. Okay, so now we're coming along pretty well here. Now I'm going to sharpen this pencil again. Now let's move on to the juicer. So I'm going to kind of redefine a few things here and there. And this one's going to be, or this object, I should say, is going to be a little bit more interesting in terms of the shading, because we're going to have some more ambiguity in some of its elements. Okay. And I can already see a little bit of a mistake here. So we're just gonna, subtle that down just a little bit. All right. Now, once again, a lot of back and forth goes into this. Now, this cast shadow here has got a hard edge line only along the kind of outline edge of it. The interior of it's a little less dark. This guy's more dark on the middle there. it's more subtle toward the top there. Okay. There's that guy pretty much redefined. There's that guy. A little come off of there. Now, I'm going to do something a little different on this one here in just a second. Okay. Now, I also need to rework back edge here a little bit, so we're going to do that. And let's not forget this guy. Okay, all right, I think that's pretty good. Let's also get the handle up here real fast. I'm doing this in a little bit heavier back or outline because there's a shadow that's going to be here, but also it's a more well-defined object in general. Okay, now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna switch back over to my vine, because a lot of the shading on this, I'm gonna allow it to be what's already there, but I also want some of it to be more subtle than what the compressed is gonna give me. I totally forgot about the shadow cast by that guy. So in this case, I want just a tiny amount. I'm going to use the line work that I put in with the compressed, with the addition of just a little bit of this vine here and there to blend out, and then we're going to erase back out, add a little more, and what have you. Okay. That is looking pretty good. All right, so let's go back to the blending stump. And this time I'm gonna flip it this way so maybe you can see a little better. I'm also probably going to hit this with my finger here in a minute as well. Just to settle everything down some, and before we come back in and redefine everything. Okay. Getting pretty close. Once again, I need to take the excess charcoal off of my stump there. Flip over once again. After this, we're going to start doing some more erasing. Then we'll redefine everything, we'll do the background, and then we'll add the final highlights and whatnot. Okay, so first and foremost, I'm going to take my little eraser and hit some of these, you know, areas that need to be cleared. All right, so we got something like that. We also need a little guy like that. Something like that. And you can see I'm using my little bitty guy here to really get in some of these harder edged areas. And then, you know, kind of redefine, you know, the hard edge boundaries here and there. And then I'll come back in with the kneaded eraser and do some of the more subtle stuff like in this region. The other thing I can see, a little bit of a subtle thing there. Okay. Okay. One more there. Once again, it's just a ton of back and forth. Back and forth, back and forth. All right, so real quick, let me get rid of my eraser dust. All right, now what I want to do is start doing the more subtle kinds of things. Once again, we're going to add some white charcoal to this too. Okay. And once again, we're gonna kind of settle things down here and there as well. I want to pay attention too to the main areas or the major areas that I see that have highlights on them, okay? So, you know, you can always go a little bit more, take a little more away, or, you know, put a little more back and whatnot, but I want to really pay attention to the main shapes that I see and kind of take out the main area, but don't go all the way in, and then I can, you know, finesse it a little bit. I'm going to flip it completely upside down for just a second, just to get to this one little area in the corner here. And all right. Now, let's go back to our blending stump. Clean it off some. In fact, I'm actually going to use the other blending stump for this. It's going to be more subtle. Probably going to use my finger a little bit here too. Okay. Got a P part right there. Okay. Sometimes you'll find that, you know, your finger is just the best tool because you can apply pressure to it, you can feel how much pressure you got, etc., etc. Alrighty. other thing I want to do here is take the depth of this line down some. So I don't want it to be completely black all the way around there. Okay. Let's also okay. All right, we're getting pretty close here. All right. Now let's just redefine just a few edges here and there. Okay. We're also gonna darken just a couple areas. Alrighty. Okay, I think we're pretty close to being ready to move on to the background real quick. So you'll see too, because I was using my finger there, that I smudged over some of my highlight that I need to have there. Okay. Do this real fast. Okay, now I think I'm ready to do the background. Okay. So for this, I'm going to switch back over to my compressed stick versus the pencil itself, just because it's going to give me more. I might switch back over to the pencil here and there for like little cornery deals and what have you. But generally speaking, just kind of fill in a few areas here and there where There needs to be just a little bit more shadow. But I'm going to let what I've already done also kind of remain. And we're just going to kind of enhance it, if you will. Okay. Something like that. I'm just going to kind of fill this background area in, and then we're going to smudge it here in a minute. Now we can really start to see things coming together. Likewise. I might have to do a little bit more erasing here in a minute after I smudge, because I might go over a little bit here and there, but that's not really that big of a deal. Once again, I'm going to flip it over just so I can get into some of these areas. All right. Okay, almost there. Okay. All right, now let's go ahead and work on blending this out real quick. So, once again, I'm trying to be really careful here, and trying not to blend out too much of, or smudge too much into my highlights and things. I am going to come back into some of this drapery here in a second with my kneaded eraser and settle a few things down. And once again, I'm going to flip it around just to make it easier to get to some of these things without messing them up. So forgive me. Now you can see that, you know, I'm not going full-blown black in most of this because there's light cast across my black sheet, if you will. And so it's not going to read as totally black everywhere. It's going to read more dark gray in places and, you know, what have you. But we're going to go in and selectively add some more black here and there. And when we add more black here in a minute, we're really only going to be doing it in like the deep, you know, kind of areas. In the corners, you know, things like that. Come back over here really quick. All right, so let's go do a few little touch-ups with the eraser here and there. Alrighty. All right. Just a couple. Little guys here and there. All right, now I'm going to switch back to my pencil so I can get more into fine areas. Oh, damn it. So the problem with these pencils, when you drop them, the lead tends to break on the inside, and you're going to sharpen them, and then all of a sudden a big old piece of it just comes out, and you got to start all over again. That's kind of what just happened to me. All right. Now let's just add some deep shadows here and there. Okay. All right. Sharpen my utensil again. Oh, damn it. Okay. Okay, almost there. Almost there. Okay. Okay. I think that will just about do it. I'm going to clear some space here. I don't want to do that. Get my paper towel again. Okay, we're getting close now. I'm going to take the eraser to the background and settle a few things up here in just a second. And then we'll break out the white charcoal. And add a few little details and highlights and things, and then we'll call it done. Okay. Okay, now let's take kneaded eraser, and we're going to add a few little things here and there. A few little highlights here and there. Okay. All right, just adding a couple little things here and there. Okay. Just adding a few little indications of the high points in the fabric and what have you. All right. Okay. Something like that. That. Something like that. Settle some of these things down real quick. And now we got a pretty good background. I'm going to take my paper towel and just settle down some of those highlights in the drapery, just to make them a little darker. All right, now I think we're ready to move on to the white charcoal. So I'm going to go ahead and sharpen that guy up. Now I want to use this very, very lightly, and I'm going to use a separate blending stump for it. So I really only want to put this in a couple of places, and it's mostly going to be as detail, although I'm going to use some of it a little more on the teacup. I'm just going to kind of go into those areas that look to have the highest light in them. And I'm just kind of lightly kind of color in. I want this to be very, very even. So I want to apply the same amount of pressure across. And it's also kind of good to change directions a little bit here and there. So So let's also, and I'm going to come back after I kind of blend this here in a second and add some just, you know, pure marks with this. Given those, you know, kind of last minute little high point details. All right. Now from there, let's also put just a little bit here and there. That. Okay, now let's do just a little bit on the jar lid and reflections for add some specific marks for detail and whatnot. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So let's go in, and once again, I've got a different blending stump now. I'm just gonna go in and kind of smooth some of that stuff out. It's all coming together now. All right. Okay. Once again, I'm flipping it around a lot so that I can work up to certain edges without having to hold my arm weird and all kinds of things like that. So, you know, do what's gonna make things easier for you. The other thing that I've noticed, I don't really like to use the white charcoal all that much, to be honest. I don't normally draw on pre-toned paper like this either. I usually draw on Reeves BFK, and that's a paper where you can erase it all the way back down to white without smudging and whatnot. So it just, I don't know, it looks better in my opinion. But some people like doing the white charcoal, and that's fine. I want you guys to be able to see at least somewhat, you know, what's out there and what's possible and whatnot. So we're going to do our best here to be representative of that. Okay, almost there, almost done. Okay. Now, okay, now I'm going to put a fine edge on my white charcoal again. I might do this a time or two. Now we're going to go in and put in some specific detail-y kinds of things. Okay. Those bright little highlights and things. Little reflections here and there. Alrighty, now since we're doing little detail-y things, this is when it really starts to come all together and we can start to see, you know, the kind of finished product of it. Couple little super highlight kind of things. All right, getting close, getting close. So, you know, we can think about all these little high point areas. Where everything is nice and bright and whatnot. And that's pretty much it for basic charcoal drawing from scratch. So, you know, once again, like any drawing, we want to start off from simple and go to complex. So start with simple shapes, lines, angles, and work your way up to complexity as well as to detail and things like that. You know, take your time, make sure, you know, everything's going to kind of go back and forth here and there. You know, I can already see a few areas where I probably need to darken, you know, things a little bit here and there. But once again, I could sit here for hours and hours and hours and really, you know, finagle it good and make it look almost photographic, you know, get rid of all the blurs and lines and, you know, what have you. But you know, this I could literally I could sit here for a long damn time and do all of these kinds of things. But generally speaking, that's where we're at, and what you should be doing. So you know, once again, simple to complex, light to dark. You know, don't be afraid to mess up and, you know, kind of make alterations and changes as you go. You know, and once again, this is a drawing, it's not a photograph, so it doesn't necessarily need to be perfect, even though I'm going for realism and I want you guys to go for realism as well. It's, once again, remember, it's a drawing. If we wanted it to be completely perfect, we would take a photograph. So don't get dismayed, don't get frustrated. Once again, take your time with it. Be patient and everything like that. But once again, thanks for joining me. We'll see you again next time.